Is capitalism voluntary? This reminds me that in one of the Facebook discussion groups, someone had posed the following, similar, question. I wonder how a Marxist may question this. The key insight of Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations is misleadingly simple. If an exchange between two parties is voluntary, it will not take place unless both believe they will benefit from it. Most economic fallacies derive from the neglect of this simple insight, from the tendency to assume that there is a fixed pie, that one party can gain only at the expense of another. Milton Friedman. My response was as follows. Friedman attempted to make the case that free market capitalism organizes economic activity without coercion by first outlining how a simple market economy would work. This simple economy consists of individuals and households where people make goods and services and exchange them among themselves. No exchange will occur unless both parties will benefit. If one party feels that they won't benefit, then no exchange will take place. Since people in this simple economy remain free to produce just for themselves, they need not participate in any exchanges unless they feel confident that they will benefit. Therefore, assuming that everyone here is economically rational, in the usual economist's sense, no exchanges will occur unless both parties will benefit, and these exchanges will occur without any coercion. From this, Milton would go on to argue that the same principles would operate in the case of a free enterprise economy. Yes, of course it is. I've seen some answers claiming it's not, but they're confusing the issue of whether an individual voluntarily engages in any economic system, versus the voluntary action within system itself. Even if your choices are, work or starve, you still voluntarily choose one of those. Just because work is the obvious choice the majority of the time, doesn't mean you're being forced to work. You're weighing the consequences of your voluntary decision, and it's typically better to work than to starve. One could make arguments as to where someone is born and which economic system is used in their region, etc. But I don't think that is the intent of the discussion. As far as the topic of what I think the question is really asking, is capitalism a system of voluntary transaction? Yes. That is self-evident. Capitalism is about voluntary exchange. This is not to say that competition is necessarily an evil either. The problem lies in defining capitalism as a system of competition, in comparison to other systems which are supposedly cooperative, is a rhetorical ploy. Those who profess it may honestly believe it to be so, but it's not true. Capitalism is not a system of competition, any more than any other system. Capitalism, at least in its free market, laissez-faire ideal, is a system of the voluntary exchange of goods and services in the absence of physical coercion, theft, compulsion or fraud, predicated upon the fundamental right to own and accumulate property. The interesting thing about the 21st century is there has been a growing shift from workers to entrepreneurs. The United States is creating millionaires at an amazing rate, in great part due to technology, 1,700 plus millionaires a day. The vast majority of these millionaires did not start with money. They are self-made. They're the average person that gets fed up with working for someone else and is willing to risk everything to start their own business. Or, they have a great idea and can launch it online as a hobby with very little risk-free. Yes, of course, by definition it must be. Contrary to the mindless rhetoric of the ideologues, you cannot have involuntary capitalism. Capitalism has two defining traits: 1. Private ownership of the means of production. 2. All voluntary economic interaction. That's it. Both of these obviously require a voluntary nature. To deny the individual the means of production that she creates or voluntarily trades for is to deny the voluntary nature of the system. To control how those means can be used is again to deny voluntary interaction. One distraction needs to be addressed. The fact that we must eat to survive does not make any system involuntary. There is a difference of kind between the needs of survival and a conscious entity preventing your action. Too many on the left deliberately confuse these two to try to pretend that respect for persons is involuntary. This simply isn't honest nor accurate. They ignore that this fact means that no system could even in theory be voluntary, so their own totalitarian schemes are involuntary as well. Of course, since there is no hint of any moral basis for their schemes, this criticism doesn't bother them. But there is the difference between capitalism, respect for persons, and all leftism and other forms of statism, morality. No one has a right to own or otherwise control the peaceful life of any other person. This means respecting the inherent moral rights of others, including obviously their right to their own property. Anything short of this is inherently immoral and unjustifiable.